This is a really interesting horror story, The Shadows on the Wall by Mary E. Wilkins-Freeman. But it's definitely not the way a horror story is written nowadays. So I read this for my long ongoing Pulp project. More information about it in the description box below. But this being a horror story, it fits neatly in this month's reading event, Horror Mayhem. Also more information about it in the description box below. But this year it's all about reading horror short fiction. This is Obscure Book Adventures. And I am your host, Annie. And let's go back to 1903, when The Shadows on the Wall by Mary E. Wilkins-Freeman was published in the March 1903 issue of Everybody's Magazine, which was a popular pulp magazine back in 1903. It's a 6-page story, so it's reasonably a short story, not counting the illustrations, that is. The story is about 2 brothers and 3 sisters. When Edward, one of the brothers, dies after an argument with his brother Henry, the sisters suspect Henry of having something to do with Edward's sudden illness and death. When a shadow that suspiciously looks like the dead Edward appears on the wall, everybody starts panicking, which I found the best part in the story, by the way. This is a little bit of an odd story in the sense of the way it was written. It consists of 3 parts. In the first part, we get to know the sisters, but there is some unexplained friction between them, which I must admit I did not really understand. Like, for example, Rebecca, one of the sisters, I suspect she is the youngest sister, breaks down and starts to cry. But the other 2 don't seem to want to know why and don't seem to care. So I suspect Rebecca is one of those a nuisance to them, crybaby kind of sisters. But it's not explained, so I have no idea why they are just ignoring her. But that's my guess anyway. The sisters freak out when they see the shadow of their dead brother Edward on the wall, and they don't seem to can't explain where the shadow comes from. So they start to freak out. The second part, we are introduced to Henry. Henry absolutely freaks out when he sees his dead brother's shadow. And this is actually the most fun part of the story, where I don't see why the sisters are afraid of the shadow, as they are speculating that, Henry has something to do with Edward's death, so they must know that Edward's ghost isn't coming for them, but he is coming for Henry, as Henry has a motive. There was a heavy argument heard between them just before Edward got ill and died. And Henry, being a doctor, he has also the opportunity to poison his brother. The third part is really sudden and short, but not unexpected. I won't go into detail about it because I don't want to spoil the plot. So I want to talk about what makes this story so different from the horror stories that are written nowadays. Well, I think the beginning of the story isn't bad, but the writing style is a bit weak. The sisters talk and speculate amongst themselves, and the suspense relies more on the fact how things are said than it is incorporated in the story. For example, sentences like, "They were talking very loud," replied Rebecca evasively. And sentences like, "Did you ever hear anything?" she asked in a low voice with a glance towards the door. But later on in the story, the suspense is more built in than relies on how things are being said and what people are doing. And I think horror stories nowadays have more of the latter than the how things are being said. Not that they are not used nowadays, but I think the horror stories nowadays have more a combination of the two, or I don't know if I'm expressing myself clearly, but it's more a whole, if that makes sense. And further, we see the story from the viewpoint of the sisters, but the sisters aren't directly under threat. We know from the get-go Edward's ghost is coming for Henry, but we get to see Henry's fear from the point of view of the sisters. Not that there is a particular viewpoint in this story of one of the sisters, for example, but as we spend more time with the sisters, I interpret it anyway of the viewpoint from the sisters. Nowadays, we definitely got to see the viewpoint of Henry, because he is the one directly under threat and who is facing and has to escape this threat of this shadow. So Wilkins-Freeman decides to end the story not by following the storyline of Henry, but staying with the sisters. And I think this is really a missed opportunity. I think this, as the most suspenseful part, is Henry trying to escape the ghost of his brother. That's where the suspense comes from. But we stay with the sisters. So I found this a little bit of a weak ending of the story. But hey, it's easy for me to judge 122 years later. Still, I think The Shadows on the Wall by Mary E. Wilkins-Freeman is a decent horror short story. I had fun reading it anyway. So, are you participating in a horror mayhem? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy pulps, also let me know. I'm always looking for excellent pulp stories to read. Thanks for watching.